Back again, another day, another movement session. Today Mondays are really kind of a day we like to get a little strengthening in and get a little functional strength. So really thinking about whether it's farmer carries or whether it's anything where you're just kind of loading the body and moving around. Trap bar, deadlifts, things of that nature where we're just kind of loading the frame and really just kind of consolidating energy, trying to be real stable. So that's really what we're going to focus on today. Before that, we'll go through a warm-up. Jim's dealing with a little back pain, so he's kind of on a little track on his own too. But then we're going to make sure that he's got a way where even while he's managing this back injury, that you can see there's a way to modify it and still do the same workout I'm going to do, which is actually going to be a little bit heavier. But we'll show that there's a way to really regress his activities where we can still do the same exact things, but just in slightly different ways. Oh, let's bring that one down. I forgot what we were doing here. Yeah. All right, so if you're struggling with a back problem, you're just don't know what to do. Like, how do I continue to train legs or bending and moving in the safest way possible? So if you think about a back squat, a back-loaded back squat is the absolute worst thing you can do when you have a low back sensitivity, or you have a disc flaring up, or any instability in your lower back. So avoid back squats at all costs. You're basically putting the leverage and the pressure right on that point of injury. But inversely, if we can put the load here in our chest in front of us, it actually balances the load out through the center of the spine and even allows even some of the front of the body to stack and take some of that load. So it keeps us perfectly centered to where now if I just drop where gravity's taking me, everything kind of falls into position and it doesn't isolate the stress on that L5, S1 lower segments. So this is really how you have to adapt. And again, you could still be active, you could still do things and actually feel better after doing those things if you modify what you're doing. So not use this one. In fact, we'll start with just a kettlebell just to get the wheels turning. And then another way you can help yourself is add a wedge, because the wedge itself is just going to elevate your heel, which is actually going to give you more room to adjust with your trunk. Versus if you're on your heel, you're going to have to kind of bend forward more sometimes to keep your center of gravity, which puts more stress on your back. But when this thing lifts our heel up, it's basically allowing me to keep my trunk vertical and not have to adjust forward to keep my balance. So that's the idea. We're going to modify, add a wedge, and then we're going to put the weight right here in the center of our chest and just working on dropping in the middle. And then the last important modification is to limit the depth, or give a stopping point at the bottom. So there's a point where he can actually feel what's going on instead of just bouncing out of it. So he's just going to sit on the box. Just take a seat. Just take a seat. Recenter, heel pressure, and stand. There you go. See, and he's got to do very little adjustment when he's got that weight in the right place. So he's just working on nice, controlled. And then at the bottom, the hard part is you really want to sit and offload and perceive that you've actually turned off, and then kind of re-engage with the exhalation and then go ahead and stand. So you're really just trying to think about it. When you have these problems, it feels unstable, it feels weak. So you're just trying to get your mind, your attention to allowing it to move and to set, reset, and you're actually with it and not rushing it. This is dealing, now you're targeting those interoceptive pathways that now tie into the posterior thalamic tract we talked about earlier, which actually stimulate the processes of healing. His attention, his energy to this thing, not his avoidance. And sit, say. It's like I'm Caesar Milan of the gyms of the world.
He's training when he's so long. Okay,
Yeah. Good. And so he's just sitting and standing. He's not squatting. He's not doing an exercise. He's just sitting down, he's taking a breath, and he's standing up. So now his back's not stuck in a constant state of work. It has a moment that it does something, and then it kind of lets go. It doesn't have to just stay in this constant state of work. Now it's more about timing. The efficiency now builds off of the lack of resistance and apprehension. Better timing, better sequencing, and then full compressions and decompressions of the breath. And if you notice, when you time the exhalation with the standing, your spine wants to feel stable. That's why we go, when we're hurt, because we're trying to create a lot of stability around our spine, but we're using our breath. If we do that a little bit, it's not going to kill us. If you're powerlifting, clearly you have to kind of hold your breath to give yourself a lot of stability. But your awareness of how you're tuning those muscles to, and your nervous system, which state are we headed in? And for you to heal, you really have to shift and stimulate a parasympathetic response. You have to signal safety. And so part of what we're doing here is just literally me taking care of Jim and just helping him tell his own body it's safe. Conditions are safe. It's not a threat. Because when you're injured, what happens to your mind? Yeah. How's this going to affect my life? What's like? Oh, I got an MRI. Do I have cancer? Like it goes all the way. Exactly, and it's just how we respond in those moments are the toughest ones. And I've been in a lot of those moments, so I guess I was speaking from experience. But here's the way I think about it too. Like I'm 40 now, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's even cold, like when you're 30, 40, But now I'm like, I want to be able to do this when I'm 90. I want to be able to bend down. I want to be able to stand up in a way where I'm safe and I'm not essentially creating a problem, right? And I think this is the way that the context of the human psyche, especially American culture, like if people consider that, like what is my real goal in life? Like, do I have a vision to move well when I'm old? Or am I just trying to what are you trying to do? You just want to look good? Like what is it? Like, like you want to, what good is it if you hurt and you can't move worth shit at some point, Dude, kids can make you strong. I swear that made me better at jiu-jitsu just from holding my kids. Hey, if you're a parent, here's a great functional workout. You take a kettlebell, right? So think about it just like you're holding your baby. Like how do you, or maybe a man that doesn't have a goal. Think about like how I want to be able to save my kids if there's ever an emergency, right? So like how can I just be strong in a way where I know if I have my kids like this and I need to stand up, I can do it. And I'm not gonna, you never know. It's just a way to make more meaning, put more meaning in the time you put into this stuff. Yeah. So also, like, I drink this every day. This is the important part. I feel like just regimented health is nutrition. So I take AG1, a scoop of AG1, 10 milligrams of creatine, or 10 grams of creatine, and then vitamin D drops with K12 oil form, and then I usually always add a little pre-workout. Today I didn't. It's kind of rough if you don't put a little something in there to sweeten it. And then I put in some collagen peptide. It's about 20 grams of protein, which I actually think is really important to put some protein on deck before you train. That way that you're almost preloading, and you're preventing your muscles from donating to the energy demand you create once you kind of break down your body. And a lot of times muscle is a quick form of energy. So a lot of times if you don't have the right protein on deck, you can really struggle keeping and maintaining quality muscle, because you're almost eating the muscle that you're building at the same time. So you can get stronger, but you may have trouble actually putting on more tissue. Carbs too, especially for muscle gain, and then also just for storing some energy. But your body actually burns fat and builds muscle better when you're fed, when you have the right macros on deck. Not overly, but I always think it's good to if your goals are to maintain quality muscle, but also just in the idea of burning fat, your fat's burned in a carbohydrate flame. So especially when you're training, be very careful about being too carb deficient. It's just quality carbs, just quality food. There's a lot of carbs in grapes.
Very anti-low carb diets, especially performance people like fire military.
Yeah. Oh yeah, put you in a pickle. And then also most of the time the suffering is really like mental fog. It's lack of recovery. And so you can have one, if you're draining any system, the whole system suffers, the way I look at it.
But you won't come and rescue you?
Yeah. All right. So all I'm going to do is just up the ante with the weight a little bit. Jim's going to stick with the little pink weights. And I'm not doing this to demasculate him. Yeah. But this is kind of the grip I like to use. Almost like a cross. I mean, you could think of even a gable grip type thing, but just kind of cradling it in the center of your chest. They call these goblet squats, or they call it Zerker squat. I had a bar across my chest. In fact, we're gonna make this super simple. We're gonna go from a split, but just like we said, a lot of times I've heard people say, like, when people are doing SI joints, just almost like stay away from split lunge, and even especially I've heard people talk about the when we're doing the Bulgarian split lunges. This is where it's totally safe, but a lot of times it's how you do it. But you're just thinking about, this is where you're gonna have the most torque counter pressure on the SI joints, because the pelvis moves like this. But if you move like this for a long time, once you get the pelvis reacting more within that coiling system, you're asking the SI joints to do more and to move differently. And so that's part of the adaptation period, is like injury. Because whenever you're adapting in the right way, you're pulling something to move in a position that it's maybe never been exposed to. So every time you're creating room, you're also creating inflammation. And then now how you respond in order to let that inflammation heal, if you stay protected, you've lost the movement. So the only way to actually integrate that movement is to let these ligaments actually be expressed and exposed to those sensitive areas. And then now once you adapt and integrate that change and you heal over 3, 4, 5, 6, it takes 6 weeks for soft tissue to fully heal. So that's why when we're doing these things, we want to make, essentially, we're trying to make micro injuries that we aren't having to take a huge amount of time to heal from. But in some instances, you pull things to an extent that it's now like just like a scar has to heal or anything. It's like, and then now you have to scale back and deal with all the emotions of, this is what I wanted to do, these were my plans, but it's like, well, the quicker we can just accept it is what it is, but also realize that it's just the first step of the good thing that's going to happen. But obviously this would be like if I were to say a top 3 thing for gym, like this would be a great thing. Just anything that's going to help to relieve some anterior pressure. But also we don't want to do like a lot of movement right now. So we're just going to focus on this position here. And then we'll do a 1-inch supported lift here. We'll just go, let's say 15 seconds. And then we'll do just this isometric hold here. So we're not really gonna move, we're just gonna sustain. So we'll go foot back, take a knee. Let's just stretch it first. 15, 20 seconds, deep breaths, maybe let's say 2 to 3 breath cycles. When you exhale, really feel like you're putting tension into the front of the hip. Inhale, release the tension, let the hip retract. When you exhale, you should feel the hip slide forward as the glute engages. Blow, blow, blow. And then release the glute. Let the hips retract as you inhale. And switch. Breathing. Keep the hip forward. And switch. And then really the motion here, you're unloaded through the knee, but your motion is actually a rotation through a glute contraction. So it's we want a retraction as you inhale. You're actually letting slack build, you're letting the glute relax. And then when you exhale, you're actually gonna feel like you're engaging the glute and you're allowing the hip to move forward and protract forward here. So you wanna feel like somebody's pushing this back when you inhale, and then they're nudging it forward when you exhale. Good, and we're just gonna do a 1-inch hold. There it is. So that's just engaging his core, the muscles that are bringing his ribs and his pelvis together, right here. They move up, and that flattens that angle. So he's essentially using his whole body, his breath, the whole system to mobilize the hip, to ask the anterior fascia. Everybody's got a tight psoas. Everybody's hips are tight because we're always sitting. They're always shortened. Those rubber bands are always, basically in a slack position. And so when you go to stretch those things out, I think I got a little dry rot on them. That's good. And then just kind of repeat the cycle. And then let's make this one where you're really not even trying to, you're not trying to feel any discomfort. Like you're literally just saying however many seconds feels good and soothing. And it feels like I can connect to the glute in the core, driving the motion. But most importantly too, when you inhale, am I turning off all the way? Or am I still kind of, persistent on, right? So there's an entire, you can almost think of it like your insula is like there's an entire brain within your midbrain that communicates with this spinal thalamic tract, this posterior lateral spinal thalamic tract, that is basically the interoceptive networks that are doing so much that are just totally ignored and missed and not discussed. But if the core of reality is that all of our healing and our improvements in terms of the cognitive mind and then the automation of the body, it comes through integration of the interoceptive system. Well, the way it operates, when you're perceiving and noticing and are aware of sensations in your mind's eye is in the body, in those sensations, you're working those pathways. And when you're doing it with clear intentions and a clear mind and sound, relaxed breath, you're basically inputting positive energy. It's literally what you're doing. It's not woo-woo. It's literally your energy is even focused on things, and you're worrying about things, and which is requiring energy requirements from your body, your brain, or you put all that energy and focus into the place of the body, and not just the spot that hurts, the distribution of that spot and how it interfaces and connects with the places above and below it through the breathing. And then that concept by itself, so let's think about, you're now engaging the qualities of a meditative experience, a mindfulness experience, but you're also now integrating it with something that your body, the automation of the body. So when you look at Tai Chi, you look at yoga, you look at all these things that create this positional balance, this length. This is literally coding of the biological computer. This is how you actually change the program. This is how you code and hack your own system, and you create a new program. Everybody understands AI these days, but think of your body as artificial intelligence. It's operating automatically. You're not, oh, I did that on purpose, but like, this is how you react. I'm not telling myself to stand here. I'm not having to think about the muscles my mouth has to use to say these words. This is how it's all automated, and that's how every body and system works. So think about the insulas of yoga practitioners are larger, up to 50% larger than an average person, but part of that is the body schema. So again, for coders out there that understand the schema, it's a mapping of a representation of the body. So a lot of people know we have like this motor, this they call the homunculus. There's a motor cortex, there's a somatosensory cortex, but deep within that, a lot of those are all more efferent, and when you think about even the proprioceptive feedback in the huge chunk of cerebellum that we have back here, and we think about all these systems that are kind of governing and running all these automations in our system, that's what we're doing. We're just tapping into deeper and deeper in a more coherent and complete system. But your attention is the currency. It's the thing that you can steer, control, and influence. So as you're putting your attention and you're putting it into a sandbox, and you're putting it to where you can control the confines of the variables at play, now you're hacking. You're pulling out code, you're manipulating it, and you're reinserting it simply through your attention of your own body from within. Literally an internalized experience, a moment that could be now recoded to cover up something that's less valuable maybe. So think about that. Consider what we understand about AI and technology and where it's going and how it's really just duplicating nature. And then think about your body as a form of that nature. And there's going to be a pattern of how we have to contemplate and think if we want to evolve as individuals, but most importantly, evolve as a culture and society. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is really just us getting off the ground with YouTube process, just documenting the work that we've been doing for years and years here. And so I really appreciate the love. Continue to follow us, engage in the comments, ask questions, obviously like, subscribe. And if you're still watching at this point, I really appreciate you. And give me some feedback and comments about what you want to see in the future, or maybe some questions that you might have been able to develop from some of this stuff. I know a lot of stuff I said probably went over a lot of heads, and a lot of people probably checked out. But the ones that are still tuned in and want to be a part of this community, I promise you I'll personally respond to your DMs. So we'll see you next time, and I appreciate you following and watching.